Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and it's Friday Ramble. I'm going to pick a couple of topics and just chat about them for a while. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right in. First thing I'm going to address before we get into the actual topics is that, yes, I did shave my head because it was a complete mess and it was too hot and I was done with it. So hopefully I will allow it to grow in with a plan this time. But for now, I am a shorn sheep. Anyway, moving on. Let's get to the first topic, which is going to be about finishing novels. I have written a lot of books as a ghostwriter and just generally. I have quite a few out, and the big trick to it all was actually finishing something. This requires an inordinate amount of self-discipline because there's just so many distractions available, way more now than even when I got started with this quite a while ago. I finished my first novel as a teenager, but to be fair about that, and I did it on a typewriter, which should tell you just where we were at with technology and things to do. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and when I was a teenager, there was just an insane amount of days where it just wasn't pleasant to go outside. It was either too rainy or too cold or whatever. You know, you name it, there was a reason not to go outside. So as a result, there was a couple of things that I personally did. Number one, I played crappy video games on the Commodore 64. And just to paint a picture of that, I played Ultima 4, which was a fantastically fun game. But when you would enter a town, it could legitimately take 2 to 5 minutes to load, sometimes more, because it's trying to load on those ancient big floppy disks. And just to paint a contrast, about 25 years ago, I tried Ultima 4 again on a more modern PC of the time. And when you hit enter into a town, you were just there. So I think that our time to play back then was probably padded with a lot of load times. But regardless, if I wanted to do something that I could actually, have some results for, then I needed a multitask. So I'd have my TV, my little tiny TV over here to play these ancient video games on, and I had a typewriter over here. So I would be playing the game, roam around, get in a couple combats, hit enter, and then I'd come over here and start typing and work on my book. Now, I'm not saying that it was a good book by any stretch of the imagination. It was just a complete book. What it taught me was not so much how to write because, as most very young and very new authors, I was just emulating some of the books that I enjoyed. Stephen King, which I read too young, like everybody else my age, and things like the Dragonlance Chronicles, which I loved. And then, of course, a few months later, and I say, of course, you'll know why in half a second, the Ravenloft novels. You knew that was coming if you've been watching this for a while and seen how much I love vampires. So I emulated those things. I wrote a book. I still have it around here somewhere, this massive typed manuscript that I just had to keep because it's kind of cool. I have rewritten that book since then. It's now called the Hermes Foundation, and it resembles it in spirit alone. But what it taught me to write the genesis of the Hermes Foundation was how to complete something. It was not so much the process of A to B, write chapter 1, write chapter 2, write chapter 3, but rather to find the drive to get through the next chapter. Now, even back then, I just had this notion that I should probably prepare as much as humanly possible. And what I mean by that is I created an outline for the book. It was the sparsest outline ever, but it was still a general blueprint of what to do. Now, funny enough, I lost that skill, or I just forgot all about it when I got into my 20s, because I did try to write a few novels at that point. I mean, I had other things going on, a lot of distractions, which we're going to get to in a moment. And they just killed the ability to finish anything more than, say, 20 pages. So I had a few short stories, but I couldn't really commit to a full novel for quite a while. Then, at around the 2005 period, I decided that everything I had been doing was crap, and I really wanted to make a go at being a writer. So my plan was I had just lost a job. I was single, and I didn't really have anywhere to go, so I moved in with a friend. My plan was to get a crappy basically part-time job to pay the rent there, to pay my food, and just work on books. And I really needed to figure out, what did that mean? Well, I had a lot of self-help books on how to write and create. Some of them were about character design. Some of them were about emotional dialogue, creating emotional characters, developing scenes, plot, all this stuff. And I read them all. They were great. And I'd also gone to school for this too. So coupling everything that I learned from school with the self-help books, I was able to write well enough to be pleased with the work myself. And that's I really wanted to make sure I liked it. I had to at least write for myself so that I knew that if there was anybody out there like me, then I'd be able to present it to an audience. Now, my first book that I really finished was around 2005, 2006, and it was Glamour and Shadows, which also doesn't really resemble too much of what it became because I rewrote it a few times since then. Just as a funny point, that one of the first drafts of it, the F word and many of its permutations were littered throughout this book. I think that it was rivaling some of the most used movies. So like the movies that use that word the most, this book was getting really close. I think that at the end I cut like 300 uses of the word. I don't know. I was using it as punctuation for some reason. Once I had finished that book, I had a really solid sense of what to do. I did try it a couple of times first. My first attempt, I just wrote a chapter just to see what would happen. I came up with some characters in my head, and then I wrote a chapter to see what I thought of it. Now, my first iteration, my main characters were pretty much Celine from Underworld and a more random character that I probably could think of somebody he resembled, but he didn't. He doesn't resemble anybody that pops into my head right now. I didn't like it at all because it just felt so derivative. And at that time, I was absolutely obsessed with originality. So I came up with the concept of twisting everything, and I twisted all the characters around, and I kept asking questions, what if they were like this, until I had the characters that became part of the series. Then I needed to plan it. I knew that if I didn't plan it out, I probably wouldn't finish it. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute, that's how I finished that darn book when I was a teenager. So part of finishing a novel is planning. It's developing the characters and giving them enough backstory that you can integrate that into the work while telling the story at the same time. And then, of course, planning the story itself, knowing where it's going to go, even if it's loose, even if it's just, I know that in Act 1, this has to happen, Act 2, this has to happen, in Act 3, this has to happen, and it's going to end roughly like this. That will leave you some room for creative impulse to kick in here and there and go, ooh, I got a better idea. I'm going to adjust the overall story and I'm going to input this here. Because part of the fun is being able to be grabbed by inspiration and go crazy. Now, one of the biggest tricks for new authors to get through, one of the things that's most important is always finding a way to fall in love with the idea again. Because we get inspired for an idea and we start working on it, and then a new idea comes along and we get really excited about that one, and the old idea either gets shoved to the side or we're halfway done with it, so we abandon it and we start working on the other one. Now, a lot of people will just keep doing that over and over again. They'll just have this sort of endless sea of unfinished projects. But it's really important to decide, how much do you really want to do whatever it is you're doing? If we can take this a step back. It doesn't have to just be about writing. It can be about creating art or music or whatever. How much do you really want to be doing this? Is it just a hobby? Is it just something that you want to scribble a little bit and have some fun and then, go back to your daily life? Or do you really want to finish something and share it with people? It's okay either way. You don't have to be an author that's going to be presenting things to the world. If that's not really what your heart wants, then just do it for fun, Write a few paragraphs, write a couple chapters, have a great time. It's totally cool. But if you really want to finish it, then you've got to constantly re-fall in love with your work. And it's important to really find that affair with it so that you can continually push yourself to get it to the finish line. One of the big things that I do to make that happen, besides the fact that as a ghostwriter I have deadlines, so I don't really have a choice on whether or not I'm going to work on it. If I'm working on my own thing, then I really try to judge how excited I am about the particular character's journeys. I just finished a book and I fell in love with the character so much that I just had to see where her story went. I, of course, already knew because I had pretty much outlined the whole thing, but I didn't get to experience it with her. I knew it in a peripheral way. It's the difference between having a cursory story of saying something to the effect of, I went to the store and bought some food, to while I was at the store, this big thing happened, whether, two people got in a fight or they were out of the stuff that you needed, so you had to go rampage the store to find it. Think about those more elaborate stories that you tell to your friends as opposed to just the quick thing you say, yeah, over the weekend I didn't do much. And I wanted that deeper part of the story. I wanted to experience all the things that I knew she could as I wrote the emotional journey of what she was going through. And as a result of that, I was constantly falling in love with the project, and I got through it very, very quickly as a result. The same goes with the Carter's Grove series. I started writing that, and I didn't have an overall plan. I had a cursory plan of the things that were going to happen, and that allowed me to allow inspiration to come up at any time. So I think that's a little bit more advanced, though. I have been writing at least one book every month since 2016 as a ghostwriter. So I have a lot of novels under my belt, and I can really produce quickly. So I completely understand, though, that some people are really struggling just to get over the hurdle of the first chapter. What I really suggest is that while we have things like NaNoWriMo that are really pushing, hey, 50,000 words is a novel and you can do it in a month. That's a great goal. It's kind of fun. But the reality is it's better to do a bite-sized chunk. A great example is I made a movie recently. It's 12 minutes long. My goal was to make a short film because I knew that if I tried to bite off more than I could chew, it probably wouldn't get done. I needed a win. I needed to see I could do it. I needed to see some kind of result and then learn from that so that I could make something bigger later. And the same goes with writing. Do a short story. Come up with something that's going to be 5 pages, 10 pages at the most. Most people can get through that. And then you've got product. You can look at it. You can express it to other people. You can enjoy it. And then you can learn from that. Maybe even expand on it. Maybe take that short story and turn it into a novella, a 20,000 word story, which is, not that bad either. And at that point, you will have even had more to develop. And I think that's true of everything. If you want to do something, you should try and make it a bite-sized chunk. And taking it away from creative stuff and moving it into hobbies, I do all this Warhammer stuff. I do all these builds on my channel. And if you think about some of those builds, they're pretty elaborate. If you wanted to play for Warhammer 40K, the big tabletop version, you're going to be looking at a massive army that you have to build and paint in order to technically compete, if that's something you'd want to do at some point. But even just so you're not bringing gray dudes to the table, it's quite a bit of work. So there are ways to get into that hobby that don't require you to put that much time into it. For example, Warhammer Underworlds. The war bands are anywhere from like 3 to 6 guys, and you could build and paint those in no time at all. And then you'd have a complete unit that you'd be able to say, look, I finished this. Something that we did. My wife and I decided that we were going to get Cursed City up and running. That was quite a few more models than 4 or 5. It was like 60, I think. But, we did it in a month and we got it done. And that felt great because at that point we felt like there's nothing we can't do now for the most part. And Kill Team is another one just like it, 10 guys at most. I just painted 10 characters. Took me 3 days and it was just awesome to finish. That feeling of success, of completing something, no matter what happens after that, you can't have that taken away. You did it. You got whatever it was, whatever goal you set, you finished it. And I think that dopamine rush alone is what can compel you to the next project and tell you, yes, I can make this happen. And it's not impossible. Now, there are some great books that can help with this. There's a guy that I read. His name's Stephen Pressfield. He has a very storied career. It's very interesting. His first novel was The Legend of Bagger Vance, which you may or may not know is a movie with Matt Damon and Will Smith. It's about golfing. And then his second book was The Gates of Fire, and it was a novel about the Battle of Thermopylae. In fact, they were going to make it into a movie, but then 300 came out while they were in pre-production, and they just dropped the film because they're like, nah, we can't compete with that. He's written a whole bunch of historical fiction, but more recently, he wrote a couple of books that are about basically creation. It's called The War of Art. Well, that's the big one, The War of Art. And then he's got some follow-up books that sort of go into more detail about how to overcome the stuff that prevents us from finishing things. And if you're doing anything that requires self-discipline, any task that doesn't have a boss telling you what to do, you're the boss, I would highly recommend these books. I'll put the link to the Amazon site in the description. They're fantastic. They're not very long. You can rip through them very quickly. I honestly found them to help me not only with my writing and music creation, but just day-to-day life. There's a thing that he talks about called resistance, and it's pretty much distractions. It could be anything from doom scrolling Reddit to messing around on social media to watching reels. I find myself just doom scrolling reels every once in a while. Any of those things that might pull you away from whatever it is you want to be doing, he calls that resistance. And, you know, if you couple that with the Henry Rollins thing about there's no such thing as spare time, free time, there's just lifetime, go. If you pair those two things together, then you should be able to find some way to balance what you've got going on in your life to complete the things that you want to complete. It's a topic that's very near and dear to me. I love it. I love helping people get to the point that they've finished something. I love helping people develop ideas. It's just fun. I used to do it professionally, but people were sort of abusing that gig and asking for things that I didn't do. And because the platform kind of required me to do what they asked, I ended up doing work that I wasn't even necessarily qualified for. So there is that. But I do enjoy doing it, and I think that anytime I can sort of spread a wealth of thought and help people get to a place of completing their goals, it's awesome. So anyway, is there a project that you're working on that you could use this kind of help with? Is there something that you'd like to do that you just are struggling to get through to the end of? Do you think a book like what I'm talking about will help you? Are you even going to check it out? Let me know in the comments, and let's chat about it. The next thing I'm going to talk about won't take nearly as long. It's about painting miniatures. I know I just mentioned that I painted 10 guys in 3 days. That was not like full-time work, of course. It was a good 5 hours one day, 3 or 4 hours spread throughout the day the next day, and roughly the same on the third day. The idea was that I was going to create the Rogue Trader kill team. There's actually a video on the channel that should be dropping next week that I go into depth talking about painting those characters, showing them off a little bit and talking about the detail work. Now, painting the minis for me is the hardest part, or at least it was, because it just felt so daunting. And much like building the models, at first that was also daunting, but I built some of the more difficult ones, the Daughters of Cain and some Necromunda stuff, and I sort of broke through this barrier and figured out that it wasn't as bad as I thought. I just needed to practice. And more importantly, I needed to practice on something that was challenging. Because once I got through those challenges and made the harder models, as bad as some of them looked at the end, I did pick up enough of an understanding to tackle just about anything so far. I've done huge models, I've done small ones, I've done the really bitty guys like the ratlings where the pieces are super tiny. I can do them all now, and I feel confident in doing it. So that's cool. I needed the same thing for painting minis. And in this case, that was the Rogue Traders. There's just so many crazy details on them. Their coats have these swirly designs all over the back and the front, and they're holding weapons up against their chest, so you've got to move around that stuff. They've got crazy details on their heads. It's nuts. But it was exactly what I needed, because once I finished them, I felt so confident in my abilities that I was like, absolutely inspired to do more, to tackle my vampire characters that I had a lot of great ideas for, but I didn't know how to do it. Now I know how to get it done. So I'm really excited to go forward with painting. Now, you'll notice, of course, that I haven't actually done a video where I'm painting. And I think that's mostly because I feel like I'm too chaotic with it. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe I should show just how ridiculously insane I do this. But like, I'm like grabbing a paint, opening it up, doing like a tiny section, closing the paint, putting it away, grabbing another one, putting that one on the palette this time, trying to do a little bit of mixing, messing with contrast paints, messing with base paints. And I don't know how much value it would have. It works for me. I don't really want to encourage someone to do it the way I do it yet, because I feel like I'm still doing it. I don't necessarily want to say wrong. I think getting it done is fine, but I don't think I'm doing it in the prescribed method. And that's with watching quite a few of the masterclass painting tutorials from Warhammer. And on that point, I want to talk about the fact that every time I watch one of those videos, their brushes are so freaking perfect. They're flexible, they're freaking tight, and they're in there painting, and it looks amazing. So I asked the guy at our Warhammer store, I'm like, how do they do that? And he's like, well, I can't speak to specifically what they do, but his statement was it's about the water being clean, and it's about how you're using the brush, and blah, 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 tons of stuff. And you see, this is exactly why I don't necessarily want to show myself painting, because I don't keep a brush that looks like that. I mean, mine aren't flaying and getting crazy, but I don't get them in that nice, really cool point that you see on the videos. So I guess I'll leave it to the professionals for now. But I will show off what I do and talk about it a little bit. But just to sum up what this part of the rant was even about, I picked a much more complicated set of models. I pulled them off in a way that I liked, and I feel like I broke through a barrier, and now I'm going to be able to do a much better job at painting. And I'm hoping that now painting won't feel as daunting as it did before. I'm hoping that now painting will feel as comfortable to me as building. Now, obviously, there's a few semantics that make it a little bit more difficult. With building, you need the clippers, you need some glue. With painting, you got to get water, you got to get your brushes, you got to keep things clean, you got to be a little bit more aware. I find it to be more intense than building. However, that said, I have brought down that dread/fear factor considerably. What did it take for you to get to the point that you felt comfortable painting? Do you feel comfortable painting? Do you paint all of your minis? Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll talk about that too. The last topic today is going to be promos that drop too soon. What am I talking about? I'm talking about trailers for movies, video games, announcements, stuff that they're telling us is coming in 2 years or more. And what does that do? What does that do for anybody? Well, I have a theory about it. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But for me, I find it really annoying. If somebody is like, coming soon, and then it's like any more than 8 months away, I'm like, I don't care. You know, that could get canceled by the time that happens. So I try not to get hyped up. And in a lot of ways, it's frustrating because that's exactly what they want. They want to hype us up about something. And I don't really see the value in it for us as consumers. For them, it makes perfect sense. And this is what I was going to talk about at the beginning of this particular segment, is that they're trying to generate hype to show investors, hey, calm down. Things are fine. Look how much people are going to love this. They're really excited about it. We've got this in the bag. But for us, for consumers, it's just like, yay, that sounds awesome. And then all of a sudden we're like, what? I guess it's going to be a while. And then just about the time that we've settled down and we're like, I'm just going to be cool, I'm going to wait, they drop another trailer to hype people back up. And it's kind of a crappy emotional roller coaster. I know that in some ways it can be fun, but for the most part, I think it's kind of destructive. An example of this really being annoying is like they announced the Blade movie, the Blade reboot for the Marvel Universe. Well, since then it's been canceled. I got pretty hyped up about that idea. I was like, oh, cool, I'm totally in. And then canceled. Talking about Doomsday, the Avengers Doomsday, and then mentioning all these actors, and they're all going to be in this, and days of just telling us about all the people who are going to be in it. And then it's like, I think it was 2027. I don't think it was 2026. But whatever. Anything that's over a year out, it's like, come on, guys. I just saw another movie that's like coming 2027, late 2027, mind you. I'm like, who cares? Like, there's a lot to do between now and then. What am I supposed to do? Stay like at a low level hype for this the whole time just to help them make people feel better about it? I don't know. I prefer how Bethesda did like Fallout 4 when they came out and talked about that coming out. I think it was Fallout 4. Might have been Fallout 3. Whichever one it was, they like announced it and then 3 months later it was just out. Or like Oblivion Remaster. They announced that and it was out that day. I prefer that. They didn't have to hype people up about an Oblivion Remaster, for goodness sake. They could just release it and make gobs of money from their $50 a unit. But all around, I think these promos dropping way too soon, it cheapens the product all around, I think. And then there's another problem that they do. If they're not doing it too early, sometimes they do it too much. Back when I used to go to the theater all the time, way too much. Now, I will admit, this is partially my fault, okay? If you only went to the theater once or twice a month, you probably wouldn't have even thought about what I'm about to say. But for as often as I went, sometimes twice a week, they were showing this sort of preview / behind the scenes thing for the Van Helsing movie. And they saturated the hell out of the theaters with that. It didn't matter what movie I went to see, that was playing. I saw it so many times. I wanted to see the movie, and even I was sick of it by the time it came out. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait for it to come out just so I don't have to see that anymore. Which was really a shame because I wanted to see the movie because vampires and werewolves. But no, I got to the point where I was just like, just make the advertisements stop. I will do anything. Seriously. I don't know. So I guess in a way they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they announce too early, then it's like, oh, that's annoying. It's not coming out forever. If they announce closer to the product, they may not get the word out in time because they have no idea how many other things are coming out at the same time. So they might be competing with other advertisements. If they show it too much, we're oversaturated. If they show it too little, then we don't see it enough. And then the advertising fails completely. I don't know what the answer is, but all I can say is I would rather not see trailers or hear about movies that aren't coming out for years or even a year. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you think that these promos are fine? Do you think there's too many? Do you think there's too little? Do you think they give too much away when they show them? Let me know in the comments and we'll talk about it. Anyway, I think that's probably enough for this Friday Ramble. I've gone on for quite a while. Please do try to connect with me. If you have a friend who'd love this channel, share it with them. Maybe check out my link tree in the description below, along with the book that I mentioned in the first segment. And then, of course, I have the Malevolence comic that you can see with 800 plus pages currently available as of the filming of this video. But anyway, that's it for me now. This is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.